Great. Well, thanks again for making time to chat with me. Let's begin by having both of you introduce yourselves and then your roles within Mujeres in Action.
I'm Anna Trusty, and I'm the communications director at Mujeres in Action.
I am Jesus Torres. I am the community organizer / policy advisor at Mujeres in Action.
Great. And how long have each of you been with Mujeres in Action?
I started as a volunteer back in 2019. I took the advocate training in August of 2019, and I think my entire world changed after that. So we were doing strategic meetings and strategic planning, and then in 2019 December, that's when we received our first grant. So then I was hired in February of 2020, and I've been here ever since.
I moved to Spokane for this job last
Wow.
February, so I've been here about a year and 4 months, 5 months.
Oh my gosh. Well, welcome. I guess I didn't know that. Where did you move from?
I was living in Colorado at the time.
Okay. I only know a little bit about Colorado. Like I've been to Denver. So I don't know like much of the rest of Colorado. Is it pretty similar to Spokane, or do you find it a little bit different?
Where I lived, it was pretty similar to Spokane. I lived in Colorado Springs, which is about an hour south of Denver.
Okay.
It's a very blue city and a very red county.
Interesting.
But it's also a lot more military and very, very, very conservative Christian. But population-wise, it's very similar. Colorado is very similar to Washington. It's just a little, it's very blue liberal cities, very red urban conservative areas, and it has pretty mountains. I do miss the views, but that's about it.
Yeah.
But it's about as expensive as like Southern California, I would say.
Yeah, I'm from Sacramento, so it was kind of a culture shock coming from Sacramento to here.
I'm from LA, so I understand.
Oh, yeah,
And Anna's from Florida, so there's that.
I was in Miami before Spokane, so
Okay.
yeah,
Oh,
I moved to Spokane in 2011. So I mean, there was nobody that I spoke Spanish with. I felt like I was losing it.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you've been here the longest out of us three, because I think I moved here in 2013.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Still not used to a lot of things.
Yeah, it takes a while. I think the first year I was here, I was looking for jobs back in Florida again. I'm like, I'm going to a different space. I don't know. But I'm getting used to the winters, finally have, my winter sport picked out, but I haven't done it yet. Baby steps.
Yeah, I feel that also. Because I'm like, oh, I want to go snowshoeing, but then
Yeah, that's the one I picked.
yeah, it looks easy, but you still have to go outside. Why don't you two kind of explain like a little bit of what you each do and how, I don't know, I guess your roles like maybe overlap, just to give us a sense of what Mujeres in Action does.
We recently discovered ourselves that we overlap so much. I mean, we share an office, we do pretty much everything together. So yeah.
Are we codependent or interconnected?
Interdependent, like that lady said, not codependent, interdependent.
Interdependent. Wow.
Yeah. So, like I said, I've been working for MIA since 2020, and as I was doing advocacy for survivors and moving along the systems, Hansel and I would talk about all these barriers that we were seeing, that we really couldn't, help each and every person in Spokane that had those barriers. We couldn't help them individually, right? Because we are focused on domestic violence and sexual assault, but what we were seeing affected our entire Latinx or even immigrant population, where people were not getting access to interpretation services. So as Mia's been growing, and then I've been growing along with Mia, we were able to pinpoint all of those different barriers that we were seeing and how we could further help our community along. And then by effect, it would have been just a, cause and effect. We would be helping all of the immigrants in Spokane by doing the work of breaking those barriers for language access in the different hospitals, city agencies, county agencies, because even though some of the places do have, protocols, the staff doesn't know about them, or they don't have the equipment, or, there's always an excuse because nobody has ever stood up and said, hey, you need to be held accountable because this is a law, this is something that needs to be done. So I think as the years have gone by, I've built a lot of relationships within the community, and that has been my role along with Jesus. Like, he got here, and I think he has more friends than anybody in the office does already. He knows everyone. So building those relationships and working with our community leaders to talk about these barriers and fix it, basically, is what we're doing. But Jesus is a little bit more in depth with the organizing part, so I'll let him talk about that.
Yeah, so the way we say it is, they should know my face and they should know Anna's voice. So yeah, when I got here last, in February of last year, I just got sat down with Hansel and Anna, and they told me, this is the grant that we have. It's called the Power Grant. It's for us to build power within our communities. This is why you were hired. And then they sat me down and gave me this laundry list of terrible things that they'd seen in the system that we couldn't do anything about, because most of the people in our office work in the direct services area. They work with our clients. They provide them all the support that they can, but they couldn't be with every single person and every single thing. And for a lot of the people that we serve, facing these barriers on their own was very difficult and damn near impossible. And so Mia decided to hire a community organizer / policy person to come and stir the pot and see what we could fix within the system. And Spokane is still small enough that you can have pretty direct access to elected officials, and to county and city workers. But unfortunately, a lot of our underrepresented communities don't know that they have that access. They don't know that they can do it. And if they know, that they don't see it as a place that's designed for them or a system that's designed for them. So they needed, people that can navigate the system with them and bring everybody along. And that's kind of how I see it. I'm getting in there, building these relationships, opening these doors, and then just bringing everyone along with me.
So what was on that list, and what are some of your
Jesus.
priorities?
That list, the first time I saw it, I was like, oh God, why did I come here? And first of all, Anna said I do have a lot of relationship people that I know here, and I am an antisocial hermit. If I could live in my home and just watch TV, read books, and mess around with my houseplants, I'd be happy. But no, I have to work with politicians all day. Oh, you like houseplants, Lara?
I love all the plants. You're speaking my language. Like, as someone who is part of like a community engagement department, like, I do not want to facilitate trainings. I don't want to be out there, I love all the connections that I've made, but like, it does take a lot out of me. And I also just want to be at home with my plants. So
Yeah, and Anna's the opposite. Like, she's super friendly and she's super great at communicating, and people love her. But yeah, so the list it looked very simple on paper when you put it. It was a long list, yes, but it was just for someone with common sense, if you looked at it, you're like, well, why isn't this a thing? Like, this isn't a big deal. So for instance, one of the things they gave me was, hey, we work in the domestic violence, sexual assault area, and yet we can't get on the services card for the police. We've been trying for like a year. They won't put our name on it. They won't put me as contact information. Why? And my brain was like, well, yeah, that doesn't make sense. Why can't we just ask the police to reprint it and be like, hey, we're just an extra service that you could use, an extra resource for the community. Why can't it be a big deal? Um, that, and then it turned into a months-long thing. Another thing, they mentioned a couple of very terrible stories of what had happened to some of the people that we serve when they went to a hospital. And I was horrified at the things they told me. But again, it just seemed like very, um, coming from LA, and I lived in Phoenix for a long time. It was just a given that you were going to receive services in the language that you spoke. If you take a minute to look up LA County's language access plan, it has a language access plan for about 25 different languages, because they understand that, there is a very large community that speaks these languages that requires these services. And you could say, oh, well, LA is this super liberal blue city. Well, yeah, but that doesn't really matter. It's just a matter of common sense. How can we serve the population that we have? They're residents of our county, of our city. How can we serve them better? And that was just the bottom line. And my mind didn't make those connections. I didn't understand why it could just be done. And then it was, they're like, hey, what about housing for us? And I was like, oh, crap. Housing, yeah. I used to work in low-income housing back in the day. And again, I understand that there's a huge need for housing, that everywhere there is a housing crisis. But then it forced me to recognize my privilege as an American citizen, as someone who speaks English fluently, as someone who has had the opportunity to build credit, to build rental history, which a lot of people that have been in domestic violence situations do not have that opportunity. Their partner or the person that was abusing, that was causing the harm, would not let them build credit, would not let them build rental history. So they had those extra barriers for housing that it blew my mind. And just, I was like, oh crap, I am a very privileged person. Wow. And so then we just got to work.
So I want to go back to the couple of things that you mentioned. What, if anything, came out of going to law enforcement and asking them to include that just little piece on that already very small card?
Yeah, go ahead, Anna. We started with not being on the card and then taking selfies with the entire Spokane PD.
Yeah,
Woo!
so now we're on the card, and we did do roll call for the Spokane City Police Department. So that was time. It was time building relationships with the officers. It was partnerships. I know the Y had a hand in that, right? We have friendships, we have relationships that we've built with many different organizations since before MIA was founded, right? So Hansel has been doing a lot of work for a long time, and we have built trust with the Y and with Lutheran. And I think those partnerships also helped. I mean, I know they helped. They helped us get that trust, right, from the police department. And then, yeah, so we did the roll calls. That was a really exciting day that, we went to the police department 4 times in one day and talked to all of the officers about our services, about our resources. Since then, we've had the DV Sergeant Donato reach out with a case. They're not very often, considering that, the census states that 7.4% of the population speaks a language other than English at home. And that's around roughly a little more than 39,000 people. So yeah, they're not going to come in contact with a DV survivor that speaks Spanish every day, but the day that they do, they have a resource and they have been using us as that. So we're really proud of that relationship, about that partnership as well, and super excited that we're on the card. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear that the Y helped, and thank you for your work on that, because I mean, yeah, you think it is common sense and it's not a huge thing. And also, if you have been used to it just, being around you, you don't see it as a barrier for other people, but I mean, it very much still is. I also want to talk a little bit about financial abuse and control over finances when someone is experiencing domestic violence, because I think, I think domestic violence is still very much like a taboo topic, and a lot of people don't think it affects them or anyone that they know. They think it's very much a issue at a distance, when it's really not. And then there are different ways that someone can experience abuse, and a lot more subtle ways, and that is the controlling finances, or not letting someone have that financial freedom. So I was wondering if you could talk about that a little bit more, and maybe what your clients have experienced, if it's okay to share.
Yeah. So many of the participants we serve, they might not speak the language. They might not have documentation status, so they solely depend on their partners. So they think it's normal, or it's just a given that they're not going to have access to the money. They have to ask for money. If they wanted to buy anything, they have to kind of itemize what they're going to spend the money on. And that is abuse. And to be able to let them know that that is not okay, that just because you're at home taking care of the kids, that is a job within itself. Like, that is expensive. If they were to put those kids in childcare, that would be a lot of money. So that person staying at home has just as equal rights to access the money that the family is making, because the working person is working for the family, right? They're the ones, that is their job, that is their role. And then the other person is taking care of the kids or home. But it's quite common, and being that the power and control, I mean, if we think about the power and control wheel, it's like almost there's a specific one for immigrants, in that financial portion of it. We see it very often, because they might not have the ITIN to go to work. So then they're being controlled by that. It's like, well, you can't work because you don't have a social. If you go out to work, then you are going to, I'm going to call the police, or you can put our entire household at danger for being, ¿cómo se dice? Like, taken out of the country.
Reported.
Deported, yes. So there's a lot of those aspects, and that you can see that the partner is using control over because of that money. Yeah, most of the people that we serve come basically with their luggage, maybe the clothes on the back of their, the clothes they're wearing, because they have no access to anything. I know some of our participants, they need to have exact, if they're going to go grocery shopping, they have to ask for the money to go grocery shopping, which that's demoralizing, and it's abusive. And in long term, you start believing, like, these people start believing that they have no rights, or they don't even have access, so there's just nothing they can do. And they feel that, so they don't feel like there's a way out, because they have no money, they have nowhere to go, they have nobody to turn to, is what they're thinking. And these ideas come from our countries too, right? Because I grew up in Puerto Rico, and there's not a lot of agencies that help for free. So coming from a country that doesn't have nonprofits, then they don't know that that our agencies exist, they're very isolated. And so much so we have participants that didn't even know where they lived. Like we had to ask them to go outside, look at the signs, on the street signs, what do they say? And it's an entire process just for them to figure out where it is that they're living in Spokane. Yeah.
Yeah, and isolation is also a very common tactic in, abuse, especially with refugees or immigrants. They're already moving from their like home country to a place where they don't know anyone, and like you just mentioned, probably don't even know, where they are, and the power dynamic is further, you know, I don't know, spread apart or even more like lopsided because
Mhm.
there's no one, right? They cut off all the support that person may have had back home. So no friends, no family, no money, no other resources. um and yeah, and if you don't even know where you are, like you don't know what resources are at hand, and there's no one helping you, like it can get very hard very quickly.
Yeah. It's almost like you're stuck in a hole. And I mean, even the language part of it is isolating. The You don't understand anything that's happening around you. So now it's like a physical isolation and it's also a language isolation. I don't know what resources out. I go to court and they tell me that I cannot be served because I don't speak the language. You call the police and they also don't speak the language. I don't want to put my 5-year-old through this, right? Have my 5-year-old translate what's going on at home. So like there's no way out really because nothing is made for them. Nothing speaks to them. There's nothing that says, hey, here's this resource. I mean, we're doing the best we can and we do have all our information in Spanish, but there's a lot of other immigrant immigrant um, communities here in Spokane that are not receiving resources either.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead, Jesus.
No, I was just saying it's very eye-opening. It was for me at least. I do a lot of small groups listening sessions with the people that we serve, and just talking to them it's really, like I said, it's forced me to see my own privilege in a very different way. Um, yeah, it's wonderful to see our model at MIA working. We just call it from crisis to thriving. And yeah, the people that I usually speak with in these listening sessions are usually at the tail end of their case with MIA, and they're just doing so much better than they were at the beginning. But when they talk to me, because most of it's been based around housing, I've been talking to them. Um, like Anna mentioned, yes, it is the lack of language, but it's also the that culture shock of, and then as you mentioned, that feeling of isolation. The recurring theme that I hear from them is the lack of community. And during these listening sessions, we develop these little mini communities for an hour or two, and it's really, really nice to see because they get to see other people and they feel empowered themselves when they talk to each other and they're like, oh wow, you went through a very similar thing that I went through, or oh wow, we have a lot of things in common. And then they start laughing and giggling and just being more open. um, it's been really, really nice to see, and our process has really been um, guided by what they say, by their experiences, by what they share, by their expertise. um, Especially in this housing endeavor that we've started. They have just, it's been really eye-opening, the things that they tell me. And, it was just things that I would never think of, that Hansel would never think of, that Anna would never think of, because we were not in the same situation. And it's been really, really great. And I'm very happy to be the person that's out there, having to not be a antisocial hermit, while I work for these people, because you know, I saw the need, and I'm really glad that I get to be out there and just bring everyone along with me, like I said.
Yeah, I want to talk more about that comfort of, you know, culture, and when that is not felt or when that's not there, and the complexities around domestic violence survivors when they don't feel that cultural connection or that they even belong, to a place.
It's, yeah, it's very interesting. Honestly, I would say that this little campaign that we've made for language access has really opened my eyes as well. We have 16 different organizations that have signed on, representing a huge swath of the population of Spokane, but so many different cultures, languages, origins, immigrants, refugees, and domestic violence survivors. It's just such a huge. When I was talking to my coworker about it yesterday, he's like, "Whoa, all of these are local from Spokane?" And I was like, "15 of them are from Spokane. One is Washington." And he was like, "I didn't even know we had that many brown people," is what he said. And I was like, "Yeah, we do. We're just, you know, we're siloed, unfortunately, because of a lack of trust, because we have that feeling of not belonging." But I've gotten to move in these circles where I've met so many amazing people that are doing so much amazing work and so many great organizations, but very few of them have the capacity to, you know, do a lot more. And we've just been very privileged, like I said, at MIA, that we got this grant where Anna and I can focus on these policy issues, on these issues at large that affect the community, without having to also do case management, without also having to work in direct services. It's just been a huge benefit for us. And I said, you know, thank goodness that we were able to do this, because there is culture here, there is diversity here. You just have to find it. And once you do, once you create these communities, it's going to be better for everyone.
Yeah, I definitely resonate with that. I think for a really long time here in Spokane, like I also struggle to find like my own culture, my people, you know, it was just so different back home, and it was almost like I took it for granted, you know, because there were other Filipinos, like I had, you know, Afghani neighbors, my best friend is Mexican, like, you know, it was just not really a thing in the way that it is here. And only now am I beginning to find other people that understand when I say, well, I can't think of any examples now, but like there's a lot of overlap between like Filipino and Latino culture, you know.
Yes, there is. Yeah, I hear you. Growing up
And
in
like
LA,
and like
like,
half our language is also Spanish, so you know, like oh, I was telling my coworker we went to visit Latinos in Spokane, their office, and going in there, I felt like I was back in California, like I wasn't just in some marketplace in California, and it did not feel like Spokane, and I just hadn't felt like that in a really long time. So I definitely feel that. Why don't you explain more about this language access campaign that has that you've kind of, I think, when was the first meeting? Like almost 2 weeks ago?
yeah, that first meeting was honestly the culmination of about a year's worth of work. Anna and I have, we started, we strategized, we thought about it, we talked about it, we argued about it, we went back and forth, we strategized some more, we sought help from here and from there, and we went to trainings and organizer trainings, and we met so many people. And then we um, we tried different avenues, and eventually we came to the conclusion, like, hey, we need to do this ourselves, but we cannot do it by ourselves. And so, yeah, then began this idea, and it's picked up so much steam. I had no idea that we had this many organizations in Spokane that represented this many different sections of our population. Like I said, we have 16 already, with a couple more that I still have to reach out to. And yeah, the reception has been amazing. Most of the people that we reach out to were like, oh, but we're so small. Oh my goodness, thank you so much for including us. I didn't realize that this could be a thing. We're not able to do this, but we will support you because wow. And they just seem so shocked that it's a possibility.
Yeah. And so for those that aren't aware of the work that you've been doing, let's just what have the first steps externally been?
Externally, we've reached out to our community for stories. Like, have you had a story about not receiving language access in the different Spokane systems? Back in January, we wanted to bring our community together around this topic. So we had our Three Kings event, and we had food, we had Three Kings, or Los Tres Reyes Magos, which is the three wise men, so people could take pictures with them. We invited, and we're successful at getting, the director of the health district, Francisco Velasquez, the mayor was there, Tim Fitzgerald,
City council president, another
city
city
council
council member.
Yeah, so we had a lot of decision makers there, and we had a lot of our community show up as well. And we had a few people share their stories within the police of not getting access to to the language that they spoke, and having to use a sister to translate with the police. So already a scary situation, and you're not understanding anything. They want you to trust them, but they're not even trying to connect. And language is such a basic way of connecting, of making that little bit of effort to say, yes, I see you and I want to understand you. If you don't have that, how are you going to trust these people, right? So there were stories in the hospital, in different clinics, the police, and our decision makers in the court, and our decision makers heard it, and they believe, yeah, this is something that we need to do, that we need to work better at. So we've been working and talking to different decision makers for over 6-7 months, letting them know of the issue, and Jesus was working with the city and creating a language access plan within the city. We've been working with the court and making sure that the forms for protection orders were available in different languages, because that was already something that the state was providing. But Spokane County decided to only use, their own forms. So they changed a word or two. So now they couldn't use the state, they could only use the counties. And that was a big problem, because now every time the excuse was that the forms change too frequently to want to do them in different languages. I'm like, well, that's just part of the deal. Stop changing the form, or use the state form, because they provide the interpretation. So now they're using the state forms for protection orders, which is, there's small steps, considering this is a federal law. It's a state law that has been in place for so long. Spokane has historically been mostly white, so I get it. They've been comfortable, and now we're trying to make them uncomfortable with the status quo, right? This is not anymore. Spokane is growing, and we want to make sure that there is a strong base for our communities to all thrive. We want to welcome all communities in Spokane. Then we need to do that with our services as well, because people cannot thrive, they cannot be successful, they cannot live that American dream if they're not given the opportunity to do so in all the realms, in all the stages of their life. Because I'm sure if you just moved here, you don't know English. A lot of people make the effort to learn it, but it takes time. And if you're in a situation where there's violence at home and you want to get out, but nothing is made for you, that violence at home is going to permeate outside of your home, and it affects us all. So I mean, it's a very selfish reason to care for everybody, but everybody affects each other. And we learned that through COVID. It was so quick, right? Whatever happened to my neighbor is going to happen to me. So why not make sure that we are, taking care of each other from the beginning? So that was, we have those forms. We're on the police victim card. And we've been talking to the auditor's office, the assessor's office. They're
County
also
clerk.
on board. The county clerk, Tim Fitzgerald's on board with a language access plan, connected with county commissioners. And now we are testifying at the county commissioner meetings in different languages. This week, Tuesday, it just seems like so long ago. But yeah, on Tuesday, I testified in English and 2 other people testified in Spanish, it was amazing. It was a lot of fun. They didn't understand a word because they denied interpretation services.
So yeah, as Anna mentioned, we met with county assessor, with county auditor, with county clerk, with the administrator of the court. And again, they were all on board, but the county, they all mentioned the same thing, that the county has a very silo mentality, that every one of those departments has to work on their own, has to figure out language access on their own, has to pay for it out of their own budget. So these are these small departments that are public facing, that have interactions with all of the communities in Spokane, not just the English speaking community. They have contact with everyone, and they're struggling. They're struggling to meet the needs and provide these services that the government has to provide, because they don't have one overarching, all-encompassing language access plan that the county needs. And every single one of them agreed, but they all had a ceiling as to what they could do. And so that's when we made the decision, hey, we need to go to the people up top, the county commissioners. They are the ones who need to make this decision. We reached out to them. 2 of them responded right away. We met with them. They agreed that this was an issue. We talked to them about what we'd seen, how long it's taken us, and the few gains that we had made. But again, we told them, hey, we've reached a ceiling. We can't get past this. It's up to you. And they said, yeah, I think you're right. I think you've done your homework. You know exactly, who you had to go to. You went to them, and then you got as far as you could. But now you have to take it a step further. And then that's again when I realized we can't possibly do it alone. Mia has 11 employees. We're a small organization, but we do have the luxury where 2 of us can focus on policy. So let's bring in everyone else. We started having meetings. We met APIC. We met with PICA. We met with Thrive. We met with Latinos in Spokane, HBPA, MCAS, every single one. We went to the Barton School, the English school. I talked to the person who runs Feast World Kitchen. All of these organizations have just jumped on board. Immigrant and Refugee Connections as well.
And the DV services too.
The DV services, correct, like the Y and Lutheran, and then Manzanita House, who does a lot of pro bono and low bono immigration services. They all jumped on board and said, hey, we would love to get this done. Spokane Immigrant Rights Coalition is on board as well. And
Spokane Regional Domestic Violence Coalition as well.
All of these people have just like, hey, yeah, this is, again, it's common sense. It's easier for the county to provide these services if they had a language access service.
Yeah.
It is easier for the people reaching out to get these services. Why can't it get done? And so, yeah, this is, we're proposing something that goes beyond interpretation, because basic interpretation only gets you so far. And we experienced this on our own. We went to the courthouse, and just getting to the interpreter's office can be a challenge for someone whose second language is English, who's an English language learner. And Anna brought up something really interesting. She said, you pile on all this other stuff besides trying to learn a new language and adjust to a new culture. I used to be a coordinator in Colorado for an entire district for English language learners. I managed all of these their cases. And in the best of situations, it took a student 3 to 5 years to be considered fully English proficient. That is in the best of situations. When you add domestic violence, sexual assault, having to work outside the home, having to make a living, being a refugee, not having a community, being an immigrant, perhaps being undocumented, all of that adds extra pressure. So no, they are not in the best of circumstances. It's going to take more than 3 to 5 years for them to be fully English proficient. And in the meantime, they still need these services. They still need a driver's license. They still need to register their car. If they own a home, they need to pay property tax. If they need something at the court, if they need the police, the sheriff, all of this still needs to be provided while they're still LEP, limited English proficient. So these services are not being delivered in a timely manner. They're not being delivered in the best possible way they can be. They're not being, they're relying, for instance, I can tell you, county assessor said, hey, the other day a Russian gentleman came in. I had to use his child as a translator. It's not, I'm sorry, but a kid cannot translate everything properly. They don't have the vocabulary. They don't know the technical language that something that, you know, for the county assessor's office. County clerk said, well, your experience at the court would have been a lot easier if I had my one employee there that speaks Spanish. She could have helped you. Well, you know what? She could take sick days. She has days off. If she isn't there, what are you going to do? Do you have a plan? No, we don't. We went to the court interpreter's office. They couldn't understand us. They couldn't get us an interpreter because they couldn't understand what we were saying. The court interpreter's office.
We went and only spoke Spanish, and they didn't have a way to serve on like people if they don't speak English. So at the interpreter's office, you need an interpreter to be able to get services. Yeah.
And so this is, you know, why we sat down and we thought about it, and we were like, we want the county to develop and implement like something that's more comprehensive and equitable for everyone, and that it goes beyond interpretation. And what I mean by beyond interpretation, I mean visible signage in the top 10 languages spoken in Spokane. These cards that have that say I speak on them. They say I speak whatever language, please get me an interpreter. We want an actual plan that gives specific processes for all departments that are public facing so that they know what to do when they come across this. Because a lot of time, these employees don't really have a recourse. They don't know who to turn to. They don't know what they're supposed to do. They just speak English louder and slower and be like, do you understand? Or can you bring a friend? You know, so we want detailed instructions on how to work with LEP residents at every level of service. We want training for staff, not just like a one-time training. We want it to be ongoing, something like a yearly basis. We would like cultural awareness training because unfortunately, not every culture deals in the same way. You need to know, hey, the city is becoming more diverse. It is we're welcoming refugees, we're welcoming immigrants. Now, how do we properly treat them? How do we properly serve them? We want diversity in hiring practices. We don't want there to be that one guy or that one woman who speaks a certain language to be in the office. And if they do speak a certain language, we'd like them to be compensated. We want them to get language pay. And we want the county to hire someone to manage these services, a language access coordinator. Either they hire one or they designate someone. And every single one of the people we talk to, we're like, yeah, I would like to know who I can call when I have these issues. I would like someone to be in charge of this issue so that I can call them and they can say, hey, this is process A, B, C, this is what you do. Let me help you with this. But no, right now, everybody has to figure it out on their own. Everybody has to make it up as they go along, and it's not working.
Yeah, I think the issue too is like they think that because they have, you know, they can check that box to get federal funds where it says we have a language access plan. They have it in writing, and only those at the top of the hierarchy know that they have access to the language line, but the employees don't know that because it's not, you know, it's 7% of the population. So not every day you're going to run into it, but the day that you do, you don't get to just say, no, you need to come back with somebody that speaks English. That employee, that staff member needs to know how to access it and needs to have that in their awareness. Because that's what everybody has told us. Oh yeah, we have access to the language line. Okay, we go test it out and speak Spanish to the people that have access to it. They don't know. They're sending us away. So that is happening like in our hospitals, at the police department. The system for the police, for an officer to access an interpreter is so complicated, and there's so many steps to it that it's just easier to, hey, is your sister here? Do you know, is anybody here knows English? Because that's so much more efficient than calling 911 dispatch, asking for the interpretation services to be patched in, takes longer. So if we were to make something a little bit more streamlined for everyone, like Jesus said, then I think it would be a lot better. We need to be better prepared. And that would be more time efficient for all of these agencies. It would be more cost effective if a person only had to do one touch point, right? I just go and I'm served and I go, instead of having to go more than once and having the staff member get frustrated because they can't help someone, and then they get mad at the person instead of the system. So it's just a lot of angst and time and money that can be saved by just giving everyone the tools they need and serving people in the language they speak.
Yeah, it's really frustrating to hear that that is not something widely offered and is not done in a way that actually works. Two questions that come to my mind hearing all this is, let's see, one, who, you know, for them saying like they do provide this service, this translation service, even though a lot of employees are not privy to that resource, you know, who is holding that accountable in making sure that is widely distributed? And then two, I think I forgot my second question. Hopefully it'll
As
come
far
back
as
to me.
that, there is no accountability. That's the problem. It would be up to us to hold them accountable. And when we did, and they failed, we had a follow-up meeting, and they were frankly very embarrassed. And that's when we came to the conclusion that, hey, these officials that we're working with only have a limited amount of power. They can only get so far. They can only do so much. Why can't it just come from the top? And why can't we have something that does cover everyone, that makes it more cost effective, makes it more efficient? Why can't we just do this? Again, it just made sense. And it's made sense to everyone we've spoken to, but unfortunately, we still have a few people that have that mentality that's, well, we've always done it this way. Why can't we keep doing it? Well, unfortunately, it doesn't work that way anymore. And then there's also the mentality of like, well, that's just how the West Side does it. And that's something we've always had to overcome. And no, it isn't about the West Side. It isn't about blue versus red. It's about offering the services that everyone that resides in your county, resides in your city needs. How can we provide these services equitably, efficiently, cost effectively? And, we're going to keep pressure up. As Anna said, we commission on Tuesday. We told them, hey, I gave them a week's notice. I said, I'm bringing people that are going to speak in Spanish. They're going to require translation. He said, oh, well, we're not going to provide it because they're not asking for a service. Again, our language access plan only says that when you're asking for services, then you meet the requirement. You're not asking for services. You just want to participate in government. Sorry, you don't get it. And so our people testified in Spanish, and the commissioner sat there with a confused look on their face because they didn't know. And next week, I will be taking Arab speakers. And the week after that, I will be taking someone else. And the week after that, and the week after that, until they understand that there is a segment of the population that is being underserved, that they are not providing the services that they are legally required to provide, and they do something about it. And there needs to be accountability. Like you said, there is none, because everyone is accountable only to themselves, not to an actual plan that is a set guideline for everyone.
Yeah, I mean, I worked at City Hall for about a year, so I'm pretty unfamiliar with the way the county is structured, but I'm confused as to why all these different departments who are under one governing body need to come up with their own plan for something that would be used countywide.
Well, your confusion extends to
I'm
all of us,
so
Lara.
confused. Like that just seems really
Inefficient.
inefficient. Yeah, very inefficient. You're just making more work for yourself, you know. Why would you want to do that, you know? It just doesn't make any sense. I don't know.
It really doesn't.
Wow. Yeah, I will be thinking about that for a while. So you mentioned, you know, next steps as far as bringing folks from the community to the next commissioner meetings. Let's imagine a perfect world together. What would Spokane look like to both of you?
Anna's better at this than me. Go for it.
I think you could walk into any Spokane agency and feel like you're welcome, like you belong. You're going to see signage in colorful posters with words that you can understand. So you know what to do. You're not walking in blind and trying to, figure out where you're going or what you're supposed to do. It's all in your language. You can see the sign because it pops up with the colors. And then when you get to the window, you can just point at the language you need. With the poster, the I speak poster, it says, I speak Spanish, I need an interpreter. And the person at the window just knows exactly what they need to do. And they will help you. And they're not, it's not going to be a burden to them because they know what to do. They have the tools. They can just access that interpreter so easily. And one visit and you're done, right? If it's all it takes, you get one visit, you're done. You were able to do what you had to do and you can go back home. You didn't lose an entire day of work. You don't have to ask for another day of work. You didn't lose money on it. You're able to get your vehicle license, right? You're able to go to the assessor's office, or if you have to go to court, you know exactly. The courthouse is tricky even in English, but so we're imagining the district court. I've been working with Judge Zapone at the district court for like maybe a way that the signs have QR codes and you can map your way through the courthouse in every different language. So it's just a place where we all do feel welcome. Like we all do feel like we belong and where we can thrive, whatever it is that brought us to Spokane. Now we can be our true selves and we can feel accepted and we can feel like we can do whatever it is that we strive to do. Because Spokane is a beautiful place to live. I love being here. I love the nature. I love being outside and all the city parks. I don't see the brown people because also, there's no signage that says welcome. This is where you belong to. But yes, just being able for my people, right, our people to be able to access all of these things that I was able to access. And I feel like I've, blossomed in Spokane. So I want that for everybody else. I want that peace of mind. I want that sense of peace and belonging for everyone to have that.
I can't add anything to that.
Yeah, you mentioned, it's easier for Anna to envision that kind of thing. Taking into account the work that you do and the people, that you work with, the systems that we have to navigate. What are some things that kind of help you keep making progress and also help you take care of yourself, maybe step back, disconnect?
Oh, like I mentioned before, seeing the people that we've served and that I get to meet with a lot to have listening sessions, listening to how far they come. And the fact that I can make that journey easier for the next batch of people, that is great. And how do I disconnect? We always often talk about this in the office. I have no problem disconnecting personally. As soon as I put on my sunglasses to leave the office, I no longer think of it. I've made it a habit to say I work as a community organizer. I work as a policy advisor. I am not a community organizer. I am not policy advisor. That's not who I am. I am myself. And again, at home, I get to sit, read my books, hang out with my spouse, do whatever I like to do, go for a run. This summer, she's taking me to the coast for my birthday to go surf again, bringing out my inner Southern Californian again. And Anna does paddle boarding. She hangs out with all her friends. She goes camping, which she tries to get me to go to, but I will not because I fear nature. And, so we gotta, we disconnect, but we unplug, but we don't disconnect.
Yeah.
I'll go camping with you, Anna.
Thank you. I'm like, I just went to Winthrop and there was no body of water. And I'm like, Jesus, you would have hated it. It was 3 days and nobody there took a shower. But it felt like I moved, like I was in a different time. It was beautiful. But I think for me, like what makes this work, like what keeps me going with this work is for me, the biggest part was when I learned about that power and control wheel and realized all of the different tactics that are used in domestic violence and sexual assault. But then it's like, well, wait, racism is just like that. Sexism, capitalism, like all the isms. So when I'm able to talk to somebody and it clicks for them too, like, oh, when my husband does this, that's a way of them keeping power over me. Just so that when somebody realizes that there's all these tactics to keep power over them and they are able to stand up and say, yeah, no, thank you. Like we can work on this together, or this is just not the way you're going to treat me anymore. That for me is a win, to be able to have more people realize that we do not have to have power over other people and other people do not get to have power over us. That is, the best feeling in the world. And I do have I have a big sense of community that to me has been a healing journey, is like community with the kids' school, community where I live, and going to these community events like the one I just went to. So building that community to me has been very healing in my own journey through domestic violence and, everything, right? Like we're so used to being individuals and separated from everyone, and that loneliness that lives within ourselves, to not feel that is really powerful to me for my life. Yeah.
Hey, Anna,